Hi, I'm Enzo Ferrari, CEO of Private Collection Insurance, and I'm on the True North Country Comics podcast.
Welcome to the True North Country Comics podcast, dedicated to promote Canadian comic book and graphic novel creators and supporters. I'm John Swinimer. On this episode, I chat with Enzo Ferrari, CEO of Private Collection Insurance, about insurance for comic books and collectibles. Please like and subscribe to this website by hitting the subscribe button, so you'll be notified about new podcast interviews and article posts. This podcast is available wherever podcasts are enjoyed. Please like, follow, and subscribe. Based in Ontario, Enzo Ferrari is the CEO of Private Collection Insurance. He's a strategic business leader with over 3 decades of innovative insurance solutions, advice, expertise, and exceptional customer service. Enzo's outside-the-box thinking ensures that customers are met with a high level of knowledge and confidence while providing optimal insurance coverage. It was during the pandemic, after reviewing his own sports card collection and finding no insurance support existed for this type of collection, Enzo realized that insuring collectibles would be a worthwhile offering for others. With over 20 years of experience, Private Collection Insurance offers comprehensive coverage for a wide range of collectibles, including fine art, sports cards, luxury vehicles, jewellery, wine, rare memorabilia, and more. Whether you're an individual collector or an insurance brokerage, Private Collection Insurance offers expert services at affordable rates, with a variety of coverage options designed for your unique collection, including all-risk coverage, global coverage, depreciation coverage, plus storage coverage, transit protection, and exhibition coverage. Private Collection Insurance specializes in insuring high-value items, including comic books, plus other treasured collectibles. So, without further ado, here's my chat with Enzo Ferrari, CEO of Private Collection Insurance, about insurance for comic books and collectibles. So, Enzo Ferrari, thank you very much for taking time to chat with me.
Oh, thank you for having me. Pleasure being on your show.
I appreciate your time. Before we get going with all the questions, I would like to know, what was the first comic book that you read?
Great question. First comic book that I recollect when I was very small was a Spider-Man comic book. And, obviously I fell in love with the character Spider-Man and the colors. And one of the big things about that I love about comic books is, obviously the storytelling, the colors that are involved with the comics and the villains and how it kind of reflects overcoming obstacles and things that are in your way and how you have to overcome them to get to that next stage or to fight evil. It was my first one. And again, I'm still a big Spider-Man fan to this day.
Cool. Now, this podcast focuses on comic book creators and supporters, and you're one of the supporters. So with that in mind, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your business as it relates to comic books.
Sure. Thank you for the question. Yeah, my business is called Private Collection Insurance, and we specialize in insuring high-valued items like sports cards, art, jewelry, watches, and of course, comic books. Comics are one of the most underrated collectibles and underinsured collectibles at this time right now, given that it's a multi-billion dollar industry. And what we do is really we provide collectors with tailor-made insurance coverage. So collectors don't really have to worry about, if the worst happens in terms of a theft, a fire, water damage, things get lost in transit. If you're ever shipping things here and there, we do a lot of dealers that, submit to CGC or PSA. It's very vulnerable given, especially in today's environment where a lot of things can happen. So that's what our company does. And the beauty is, like I said, that's all we really do is insure high valued items and collectibles. We don't do house insurance, car insurance. I have other brokerages that do that, but this company specifically focuses on only collectors.
Right. I think this is a good conversation to have because we see a lot of people who, in fact, I was just at Fan Expo Canada and people were rummaging through these long boxes for books to fill their collection. So why should people insure their comic book collection?
Well, what most people don't understand, and or maybe they do, I'm not really sure, but they have to understand that a comic book collection or a watch collection or a sports card collection, those items are not insured under a standard homeowner's policy. Usually, a standard homeowner's policy will have a specific limit for collectibles, and most limits are $5,000. So, if your comic book collection is anything over and above $5,000, your homeowners or condo insurance or tenants package that you have to insure your contents and your dwelling will not pick up the loss if something ever happens. So that's the biggest thing. And as you probably know better than me, you're in this industry, like the actual comic book industry more than I am. The values of these collectibles are not getting any lower. They're actually increasing, and the market size is becoming, the values are becoming astronomical, as you could see with all the auctions and all the great things that are happening around collectibles these days.
I probably should have asked this question at the outset, but for someone in the insurance market, how did you stumble into comic book insurance? Was it something that it came out of the blue, or was it something you saw that was needed in the industry? How did you fall into this?
Yeah, exactly. A little bit of both. I'm a bit of a collector. I have quite a bit of collectibles, including comics, a lot of sports cards, and it was actually during COVID when I started really buying a lot of, the sports cards and collectibles online because, we were all kind of bored at home, sitting at home doing work. But it was kind of a passion of mine from many years ago, and I rekindled it during COVID. And, one day I was sitting at home doing an inventory, and I realized, being in the insurance business, that these items are not going to be covered should something happen, whether it's theft, fire, water damage. So I did a bit of research and realized, especially here in Canada, there's really nobody insuring collectibles or high valued items the way it should be done. So kind of fell into it, and I started private collection almost as kind of a hobby business for myself to really insure and protect my own collection. And it really wasn't meant to like grow, or, I was going to do people that I knew and people in the hobby. But very quickly, I found out that there's a huge demand for this product out there, that, your regular insurance broker or agent that you deal with for your house or car insurance really doesn't understand the values associated with these collectibles. And me being a collector and plus an insurance broker, I thought, what better way to really protect collectors? And, I've had so many conversations with collectors, and everybody I talk to says there's a huge need for it. Again, when you're talking to your normal insurance agent, they don't understand the values. And most insurance companies in Canada don't even want to touch this stuff because it's just very volatile and very high risk. So we came up with a company. We have great plans for not only just collectors, but dealers, submitters, people who submit comics or sports cards, watch collections, jewelry. And again, it was kind of a funny backwards falling into this company, but I'm having a lot of fun actually doing it because I'm sure the hobby. Anybody collector you talk to, there's a great story, and I love the business, and I want to protect it. I want to make sure people's collections are insured should, God forbid, something happen.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, I know that part of the reason why some comic books are more valuable than others is that our parents threw most of them away. So, so there are some that are collected. I've heard some stories from people who had their entire parents' collection given to them. So some of those unique comic books are still in there. But for the most part today, we see like number ones. People just grab like about a handful of number ones and hope that it rises in value, key issues, this sort of thing, first appearances. So I guess that's where most people today are looking at the value in comic books.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, like I say, the values, I mean, you go to the shows, I'm on eBay all the time, and I see it, and I follow the auctions, and you just see the values, especially the limited runs, the older ones. They're just becoming so valuable. And, I don't lie when I say this, that most collectors, whether it's comic books or sports cards or anything else you collect, like art or coins, I would estimate that 95% of collectors don't have any insurance on their collections. And, I'm hopefully here to fill that gap and really educate collectors on what they need, what type of insurance, how to insure it properly, give you the right advice. Again, I'm a collector, I'm an insurance broker, so I can kind of marry the two and understand exactly what type of products you need to protect your collection.
Yeah, it's definitely something that helps you sleep at night. I'm sure a lot of people listening now are going to go, "Oh my gosh, my collection! What am I going to do?" So yeah, definitely something to keep in mind. I got to ask you this question: then, out of all the work that you've done with this particular niche, can you name the most famous Canadian comic book that you've insured?
Great question. And I don't think we've actually insured a high valued Canadian comic book yet. And again, it goes kind of back to my point about collectors and not insuring them. I go to the shows. I was at the Fan Expo as well. And, everything's kind of laid out. And I've been, to the National in Chicago for the Sports Card Expo. I go to all these shows and it kind of gives me a little bit of anxiety because I know most of these, most of the collectors and the dealers there too don't even have any insurance on it. And people are just rummaging through all these boxes of comics and things like that. But that's the biggest thing. Like I said, we do have comic book collectors. We have a fairly sizable collector that has a large seven-figure comic book collection. I'm not sure if there's a Canadian comic book in that collection, because the beauty of what we do, and I really want your listeners to understand this, is we only need to know like your top 5 or 10 comics. We do not need a complete inventory of every single comic. What we do is we do a blanket limit. So if your comic book collection is worth, for example, $100,000, we only really need to know the top 5 or 10 because they're usually the most significant ones of value. And then we blanket coverage everything else. So you don't have to call me every 5 minutes when you buy and sell a 30 or $100 or a $500 comic book. It's blanket coverage. So in that collection, there may be a Canadian one. I'm not sure. I know of his top 5 or 10, there wasn't. It was more obviously the US based ones. But I'd love to hear, I'd love to actually hear from one of your listeners if they do have some Canadian comic books, and I'd love to give them a quote and just to see what it come out to, but and really learn the history. I think, from maybe a more of a novice, I'm not a big speaker in the comics like maybe you are, but I'd love to hear the story behind the Canadian industry and the Canadian comic book industry.
Yeah, I guess it's sort of a chicken and an egg sort of situation, right? Because you've got to get it graded and evaluated first. Because I could say, oh, they're invaluable. These books I have here are worth millions of dollars, but you have to get a professional to look at it first and give the price or the value, and then come to you and say, okay, yes, this is the top 5 I have, and here's the value of it. So people have to do their homework first before they come to you. You're not going to provide that service, right?
No, we do work with appraisers and other people in the industries that can determine the values. I mean, most today, with the internet, you can kind of determine what the values are. But, the biggest thing for us is, if it's graded, obviously it's going to be a lot easier to determine the value because, as you know, the grade that you get on a comic book when you do send it out for grading has a huge impact on the value. And if not, then an appraisal would need to be provided. But again, we don't need to insure just graded comics or things that have appraisal, like raw comics. We can insure them. Again, we do a blanket. Should there be a claim, obviously, the more you can document your collection, the more photos you have of your collection with the values attached to it. These are the things that we look for because, again, you got to remember if you have a claim, an insurance company is not going to just cut you a check because, as you mentioned, you say it's worth $1 million. Great. Now you have to prove that it's worth $1 million. And if it's graded or there's an appraisal, it's a lot easier to determine the value.
Right, exactly. Okay, well, thank you for clearing that up. Good stuff. Here's a question that sort of came out from, again, one of the creators I was talking at the show, Fan Expo, and they brought up to my attention about limits. Let's say, for example, someone has Action Comics #1. We're always hearing about this comic book. It's very key, and it keeps rising in value. So I got to ask you, is there a monetary limit to the item that could be insured?
No, we have limits. I mean, there's really no ceiling of what we can insure. The insurance companies that we deal with across, North America and some in London, Lloyd's of London, we have limits of up to $200 million US dollars to insure anything, whether it's a watch collection, art, sports cards, or comic books. So no limit at all. Like, bring us your highest valued items. We'd love to quote it and insure it.
Okay. With everything that you've talked about and dealt with people in the comic book collecting industry, what are some of the top tips, maybe just a couple, that you would give to someone who has a comic book collection right now or is thinking of starting a comic book collection when it comes specifically to insuring their own books? What would you say to them?
Yeah, so simple. Number one, document your collection 100%. Keep a track of what you have. Take photos and videos of your collection. It's not really hard to do these days with cell phones. So a picture is worth 10,000 words. So if you have documentation, a picture, maybe a video, and values, if you've purchased the book, if you can keep receipts depending on where you bought it. I know in the collectible industry, cash is usually king, and a lot of deals are done at shows where there's no real receipt. But if you're buying from eBay or some other auction sites, keep the receipts handy. Get your most valuable comic graded, or at least have some kind of appraisal on it so we know, should something happen, what the comic book is actually worth, and we can settle a claim. And then the other part of it is not so much in terms of values, it's more like, where are you keeping the comics stored? So proper storage is very important. If there's a lot of humidity, comic books can get destroyed. I recommend to my customers, whatever you're collecting, if you can, do not keep it in a basement. Keep it either on the main level or on the second floor if possible. If not, if the basement is really the only place you can keep it, please keep it at least 4 to 6 feet off the ground. Water damage, floods in basements happen all the time. And if you can really keep your comics safe and secure, a safe, obviously, that would go a long way, an alarm system in your house. And then, buy insurance. I say this 1,000 times a day. You really need to protect your collection. You want to sleep at night, and anything you collect takes years and years and years to collect. And usually a lot of people have thousands of dollars invested. And again, we're not going to replace that collection with insurance, but at least you'll get your money back and, make you even financially. Again, the sentimental value of the comic and all the work that went into collecting that comic book, we can't replace that, but at least we can replace your financial investment in that collection.
That's good advice for sure. So, with everything that you said, where do you recommend that people go online to find out more about your services and your company?
Easiest one is obviously our website, which is privatecollectioninsurance.com, all one word. Or on Instagram, we have two sites that you can kind of look at. So one is at Private Collection Insurance on Instagram, and I specialize in insuring this. So my Instagram account is at Enzo Ferrari 68. You can reach us there. Those are the easiest ways. The other thing I do want to mention before I let you go, I will be at the comic book show in Toronto on Sunday, September 28th. I will have a booth, and I hope to see people come up to me and ask me questions. Whether you get a quote or not, I just love educating collectors, and I hope they have a lot of questions for me and I can, help them out.
Super. Well, thank you for that, Enzo. Those are all the questions I have, but I'm wondering, is there something I didn't mention that you'd like to get across in this interview?
No, I think you've answered a lot of the questions. Again, my role here is obviously to educate collectors. I really want them informed as to what the risks are. If you follow us on Instagram, I always do tips. I always do best practices. If you're going to a trade show, whether you're a collector or a dealer, please buy insurance. There's a lot of exposures. And, if you watch the news these days, there have been incidences of theft at shows, and people need to realize, when you're a hotel room, when you're in your car, when you're carrying around your collections, it's vulnerable to a lot of different elements. And I really hope people, just follow us, and, we got a lot of tips and we can help, and hopefully you buy insurance at the end of the day. But even if you don't, I can give you some risk management and how to protect your collection, even if you don't want to buy insurance.
Thanks to Enzo for the chat. You can discover more about private collection insurance online at privatecollectioninsurance.com and on Instagram at Private Collection Insurance. You can discover more about Enzo Ferrari on Instagram at Enzo Ferrari 68. And thank you for tuning in to the True North Country Comics podcast. I invite you to visit the True North Country Comics website to listen to even more conversations with creators about making comic books and graphic novels. I also encourage you to subscribe via the website so you'll be notified about new podcast interviews and article posts. This podcast is available wherever podcasts are enjoyed. Please like, follow, and subscribe. You can follow along True North Country Comics on most social media sites, and you're encouraged to send any and all feedback to John at TrueNorthCountryComics.com. Thanks for tuning in, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. True North Country Comics podcast is copyright True North Country Comics, copyright 2025.